Welcome to the Real Estate Espresso Podcast, your morning shot of what's new in the world of real estate investing. I'm your host, Victor Menasce. Today we're talking about something on the surface sounds incredibly simple. Imagine you own a rural or semi-rural property. Your neighbor wants to buy a small strip of land from you, and maybe it's a few feet along the boundary. Perhaps it's a small amount of acreage that makes their parcel more usable. Nobody's building anything. Nobody's cutting down trees, nobody's filling in a wetland, and nobody's changing the physical condition of the land. You're just moving a line on a plan. How hard could that be? Well, in many jurisdictions, the answer is much harder than you think. A boundary adjustment, a lot addition, a severance, or a merger can trigger an entire planning process. In some jurisdictions, you could be dealing with a municipality, a zoning board of appeals, a surveyor, a lawyer, a planner, a lender, a conservation authority, and sometimes an ecologist or engineer before the transaction can close. The first lesson is that land is never just land. Land is a bundle of legal, physical, environmental, financial, and regulatory attributes. And when you move a boundary even slightly, all of those attributes need to be retested. Take one example. A small severance from a property to be sold to a neighbor. Before filing anything, you need a title search, confirmation of ownership, review of existing mortgages, confirmation of easements, zoning review, lender consent, letter of intent. The entire list of deliverables to get from start to finish was 10 pages in length. Then comes the environmental overlay. If the property falls within a conservation authority regulated area, the process changes significantly. That process is in parallel with the governing jurisdiction. It requires a pre-consultation with the conservation authority, potentially an environmental impact study. That study might be required if the property or the proposed transaction is within or adjacent to wetlands or a watercourse. And here's the frustrating part. You might not be proposing any development at all. The land might look exactly the same after closing as it looked before closing. But the approval agencies are not only looking at today's transaction, they're also asking what legal development rights might be created tomorrow, and that's a key distinction. A severance is not merely a transaction between neighbors. It can create a new legal parcel or alter the development potential of an existing one. The municipality and conservation authority are therefore looking at the future consequences of today's paperwork. In another example, a proposed 4-parcel configuration creates an entirely different threshold question. Before spending money on drawings and applications, the first determination is whether the proposal can proceed by consent or whether it crosses into the territory of plan of subdivision. That determination affects servicing, engineering, the legal structure, the drainage, and the municipal agreements. In that case, there could also be questions around widening roads, legal drainage, access to rear parcels, and whether the conservation authority needs to field verify regulated area boundaries. And that's where investors and landowners often get caught. They budget for a survey and a lawyer. They don't budget for a planner, an ecologist, an engineer, an environmental study, conservation authority review, multiple applications, revised legal descriptions, title insurance, and months of elapsed time. Physical work might be zero, and the administrative work could be huge. There's a lesson here for anyone buying land, developing land, or even selling a small piece of land to a neighbor. Don't underwrite the transaction based on how simple it looks. Underwrite it based on the approval pathway. First question is not what do you want to do? The question is who has jurisdiction, and then what conditions can they impose? The third question is what studies could be triggered before they're willing to say yes. And sometimes the answer is easy, and sometimes the answer is a 30-day consent process. But sometimes the answer is wetlands, floodplain, endangered species habitat, drainage, easements, lender approvals, all of these things that cannot be satisfied quickly. The best protection is pre-consultation. Before signing a firm agreement, speak with the planner, speak with the conservation authority, have the surveyor prepare a concept sketch. Have the lawyer review title and easements. Confirm whether the lender will consent to a partial discharge or subordination. Don't assume that because the transaction is small, the approval burden will be small as well. In real estate, complexity is often hidden in the quiet corners of the deal. A line on a survey could look harmless, but that line might cross a wetland buffer, a floodplain, or a municipal drain. And that's why disciplined due diligence matters. The amateur simply sees a property adjustment, and the professional sees a series of approvals, conditions, dependencies, and closing risks. As you think about that, have an awesome rest of your day. Go make some great things happen, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.